Hello and welcome to Wide Angle. This has been a phase of very rapid developments across the world. For our purposes, let us begin with the NATO summit in Wales, which focused largely on Ukraine, and then day after tomorrow, we shall have the President of the United States, Barack Obama, make what he called a speech which he says is going to give the game plan for what he plans to do with the ISIS. Now, this is a wide campus, but we have a team which will be able to cope with it in a sort of not a rushed way, but as succinctly as we can. We have on the extreme right Professor Arun Mohanty of the JNU, who in fact is among the few people I know who've just been to Ukraine. So we'll have a first-hand report, as it were, from you. Then we have Ambassador Prabhat Shukla at the Vivekananda International Foundation. Let me start with you, Professor Mohanty. Let us in fact begin at the beginning, the NATO summit. Some people said NATO should be grateful to Putin for having made it look so relevant because of the issue at hand in Ukraine. You think that's a...
No, I think this is little exaggerated. No, NATO remains relevant. The only thing what Putin has helped for NATO is, see, as you said, Ukraine was in the focus of NATO summit. President Poroshenko of Ukraine was in the center of the summit. So everybody was paying attention to him. There are a lot of rhetorics that the entire NATO is going to help Ukraine. There would be assistance, economic assistance, military assistance, like that. But finally, the outcome is almost zero. So they would be supplying arms worth of some $15 million. NATO as a whole is not going to supply any arms to Ukraine. Individual members like Poland, Britain, France would be supplying some arms. So the summit was full of rhetorics in terms of Ukraine.
That's well, I mean, if you recall, Prabhat, some very senior pundits like George Kennan and Mandelbaum in the 90s, they said something. I said, look, by keeping NATO alive the way you are keeping it alive, it alienates Russia without strengthening NATO. Do you think there was something to that?
No, I don't think so. I think the idea behind keeping NATO alive, you can see this gradually, is to move out of what was known as the in-area operations, which was originally limited to the NATO and the Warsaw Treaty space. Over the years, they have gradually moved out beyond that, and I think this has been done consciously and with full knowledge of the implications. For example, this time round, this summit, one of the things they have referred to is an energy program. Now, when you talk energy, you're talking the whole world. There's also a reference in the last communique from the Wales summit to North Korea. So it looks as if NATO is becoming one cohesive force for taking some sort of proactive role throughout the world. And I think this is being done consciously and with full understanding of the implications. As far as Ukraine and Russia itself is concerned, I think, quite frankly, it's true. Putin has given NATO a way out. Equally, I would say NATO and Poroshenko have given Putin a way out. I don't think either side is really looking for a confrontation today, and I think both of them would be very happy if this could be made to work. Sadly, the ground situation suggests that it's not working. The ceasefire seems to be breaking down, but it's still early days. The agreement was only signed on Saturday, So, we can wait a little longer to see whether it holds or not, but the early signs are not propitious.
If the ceasefire is not holding, Professor Mohanty, and you have been there, how do you see the picture evolving? Why is it not holding?
Now, first thing, the two sides which are involved with the conflict are the Ukrainian official forces and the rebels. But along with the official Ukrainian forces, there are private armies like Azov, Dnepr, Donbass, who are built and financed by the local oligarchs. So, who are a motivated force, unlike the Ukrainian army. So, these motivated forces are not going to lay down the arms. They would break the ceasefire and go ahead. Same is the case with the rebels also. There are radical elements among the rebels. So, well, under Putin's request, pressure, whatever, rebels have agreed for the ceasefire. Otherwise, there was no logic, there is no reason why they should agree for ceasefire at this moment when they have launched a very massive offensive and they were marching ahead. So, even there was a discussion that it is a matter of weeks before other cities like Kharkov, Odessa, Kherson, Nikolaev are captured by the rebels. So, and rebels were not very keen to stop their offensive also, but because of the pressure from Putin, they have agreed. But among the rebels, there are also radical fellows who say, no, why should we go for this ceasefire? We should march ahead, and even there is talk that they should march ahead up to Kiev. So, that is the reason, ceasefire is not going to hold, just like in the June. There was a ceasefire, it didn't hold for a long. So, this is going to happen.
The ceasefire is, according to you, is not holding because of these reasons. There have been persistent stories from the Western sources, obviously, that the Russian troops are there, boots on the ground. Now, obviously, the Russians say, no, that is not true. How do we find out what the truth is?
The reports coming from Ukraine, Russia, from the international media suggest that there are some 20-25,000 rebels who are armed there. And rebel sources also say there are Russians. Maybe there are some 3,000 to 4,000 Russians who are fighting along with the rebel forces. But who are those 3,000 to 4,000 Russians? So, they are not the regular forces of Russia at all. There is no evidence to suggest that they are the regular force of Russia. Some are retired, some are on vacation, some are volunteers. So, they are basically volunteers from Russia. There is 3,000 to 4,000, not more than that. But they are very well trained people, there is no doubt. But if you look at the other side, there are also hundreds of volunteers fighting along with the Ukrainian army. Blackwater, what is that? American
mercenary groups.
Yes, mercenary groups from Europe. Even there are Russians who are fighting along with the Ukrainian army against the rebels. So, this talk about Russian invasion, presence of Russian troops, this is not true at all. So, the truth is, these Russian officers who are retired or who are on vacation, or those who are maybe at best they have been forced to go on vacation and fight there. That is what has happened. Russia has not sent a single soldier of its regular army or regular force to Ukraine.
Unfortunately, in a situation like the one obtaining in Ukraine, there is no way to arrive at the truth. There is a Kiev version or the Western version, and there is a contented version which is challenged by one version is challenged by the other. How do we, in your business of diplomacy, how do we have our sources of information?
Well, we have our sources of information from the ground up, or should it at any rate, and I believe that we do. I just want to elaborate on what the professor just said. The Russians themselves are not denying that their volunteers are fighting. All they are saying is, we've got some of our volunteers, you've got some of your volunteers. And the numbers probably also roughly match. But look, the ground reality is this, that from say late July to about the middle of August, the Kiev forces were making advances on all these places, particularly in the southern belt, that is southeastern belt. And there was talk that Lugansk and Donetsk were themselves were going to come under attack. And then the tide turned. Very obviously, something was infused into the situation, and that caused the military situation to change. And I think after that, I think both sides realized that this kind of fighting can have serious consequences. And fortunately, I would say, the president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, actually I think has shown maturity and has worked with Putin, who has also shown a desire not to escalate, so that they have worked out. First, Putin suggested his 7-point program, to which Poroshenko said yes, and then elaborated on it to make it a 12-point program. And you know, it's very striking that Yatsenyuk, his prime minister, has actually opposed it. So you have a funny situation where even within the Kiev government, there doesn't seem to be total agreement.
One is more of a puppet of the West than the other?
You know, the West on this one I find is not quite monolithic. So I think they are both supported by different
it's very interesting
elements in the
making.
West.
They are not monolithic.
Yeah.
Could you just very quickly say the shades of difference?
I shall. You know, we've talked about this on an earlier program about the kind of push that took place in the Balkans.
Right.
And the kind of forces. Now, to give you an example, the man who led the movement for an independent Croatia, Franjo Tudjman, actually used exactly the same symbols that were used by the Ustashi in the Second World War, backed by the Germans, by Nazi Germany. Yatsenyuk belongs to a party called the Pravi Sektor, and they used to have a think tank which was called Joseph Goebbels Study Center. So, you know, that open, and that gives you some idea of one set of forces that are pushing this the situation. I believe that you will find elements that back this in the United States and in Europe. Equally, I think, say for instance, the German government, the French government are all, I believe, pushing for a more moderate response, and they are the ones who are encouraging this kind of dialogue between Putin and you know, Angela Merkel has been talking to Putin on a regular basis right through this crisis, and so is Poroshenko, and so is Putin actually. Putin drew up this 7-point program on a flight to Mongolia, and then he conveyed it to Poroshenko. So you know, it's you see both kinds of elements.
Thank you so much. You know, we will come back to the big picture, but a little detail which seems to be missing from our radar. Remember, what exactly has happened to the Malaysian airline? Which I know I'm sort of flogging a dead horse, but the horse is not quite dead, because we don't know what happened to that wretched horse. There was the black boxes were found. The black boxes were then decoded, and they probably have all the reports. Why are the reports not in what is public these days said public domain, which means why are they not being discussed? Why not?
You want me to answer that? You know, actually, Russian side has raised certain questions. Number one, Russians have already disclosed their satellite pictures. Americans have not so far. This is number one. Number two, you know, there was a talk between the dispatchers from the Dnipropetrovsk city and the pilots of the Malaysian aircraft. And those talks are not being disclosed, and the people, Ukrainians, who were holding the talks in this dispatcher's office, they have suddenly vanished also. So, and Russia has been telling that there was an aircraft which was flying very close to the Malaysian aircraft. Which is that aircraft? What is that aircraft? And Russians strongly believe that a missile was fired from this military aircraft to the Malaysian aircraft.
You see, here again, Prabhat, we have a problem. The debate is entirely controlled by the Western media. If they choose, it will be discussed. If they choose, it shall not be discussed. So we have decided, but we shall discuss it without the facts. No. Now, who has the facts? Professor, you better unearth these facts so that we can have a discussion on this next round. We must know. I mean, we can't, just because two powerful sides are hiding and playing cat and mouse among themselves, that the rest of the world has to remain uninformed. Having said that, we shall take a short break and we shall resume. A short break and we shall come back.
मैं तो सीधी सीधी बात करने वाला आदमी हूँ कि जिस जगह पे सत्य है वहाँ खुदा है, जिस जगह पे अहिंसा है वहाँ ईश्वर है।
Hello and back to Wide Angle. Let us, having touched on Ukraine, we may come back to it while summing up. Let us now move on to the theatre in West Asia, which was also in their focus, though not in such sharp focus as Ukraine was. Why not?
I think right now Ukraine is more important for them, but increasingly the Western theatre is becoming important for NATO.
West Asian theatre.
And you should expect something day after tomorrow when Obama speaks, because they are unable to make up their mind about the steps they are supposed to take to curb the influence of ISIS. So this ISIS, it is operating from Syria. So if you want to control them, finish them, whatever, you have to do something in Syria, maybe with the Syrian establishment first of all. But it is not being, America is not ready for this kind of action, joint action with Syria, just like Ambassador was telling,
yes.
You know, Afghanistan. So the elephant in the room is Pakistan. So Pakistan is not discussed. Pakistan's role.
What you're saying is that they are in Afghanistan, while discussing Afghanistan, the elephant in the room is Pakistan, but they will not discuss Pakistan. Likewise, in ISIS, you're trying to say that the basic theme, the drama is evolving, developing in Syria, but they are focusing on Iraq much more. Right. Could you elaborate on that, Prabhat?
Well, yes. In fact, it struck me that there was a reference to Afghanistan too in the communique, or it's called the declaration, I think, the Wales Declaration. Point is that in all of these areas, they are reluctant for different reasons to go into the root cause of the challenge that they allegedly face, because one doesn't even know how serious they are about this challenge. So far as the Taliban are concerned in Afghanistan, for example, you know, I think Karzai has said this times without number, that the root of this problem is in Pakistan. But no, Pakistan is a major non-NATO ally. And it's the same thing happening here, because they don't want to go to Syria, because the headquarters of the IS are in Raqqa. Everyone knows that. But the moment you do that, you are shoring up Bashar al-Assad, and you don't want to do that. So it's a very peculiar bind which they inevitably put themselves in, and then say, you know, I mean, within this narrow framework, we are going to have to find a solution. And you will not find a solution in that narrowly defined framework.
Well, they have, what they seem to be doing, they have brought about, in a manner of speaking, a regime change in Baghdad. Nouri al-Maliki is gone, and someone a little more favored by them is as Prime Minister. They will soon have a government, and he has to be strengthened, because he is going to be all-inclusive. But if you go and you give the battle halfway, you concede it to Bashar al-Assad and say, listen, You were actually fighting the right guys. Now come join us. Now, how the hell do you make that? How do you make that U-turn? Isn't that?
So the Americans have to learn a lesson. They have messed up things in Libya. So they have messed up things in Syria. They have messed up things in Iraq. And they are going to mess up things in Ukraine, most likely.
Look,
I don't know.
I think it is the prerogative of a great power to go mess up things wherever it likes, because it has the clout to do it. Now listen, isn't it? I mean, it's an imperious way of running the world, that look, we have the clout, we have the wherewithal, we'll go, we'll intervene, we'll create a mess, we will not have the capacity or we will not have the will to control the aftermath. And this is likely to happen here also. But why are we so negative? Who knows? They may actually be here.
No, what is happening? They are creating the, Bhasmasur. But ultimately the Bhasmasur is going to kill them. So these fundamentalist, religious fundamentalist forces, they were financed and created by Americans.
By Saudis, American incentive, European incentive, Saudi wherewithal, so Bandar bin Sultan very much in the
That's
front.
right,
Then mobilized. Everyone was involved. Turkey, Qatar,
Pakistan.
Pakistan. Now that, when you mention Pakistan, I'll come to that one. Yes, sir. You were saying something.
No, it's like a Frankenstein who has been created by the Americans, and the Frankenstein is going to punish them, kill them. Americans don't know how to handle this, tackle this. In the beginning, Americans, they said, we are getting out of Iraq. So finally, after a few years, now they are saying, we are bombarding. So next, I don't know, they would send the troops
First,
again.
let us establish who is, before we get to the Americans targeting ISIS, who is the ISIS targeting? I mean, who is in their target, in their line of fire?
No, their objective is to create one caliphate. And they see Americans are standing in their way to create this caliphate. So they would go against the West, the Anglo-Saxons.
Let me make us offer you a thought. You see, the country that is not being mentioned, and when the country is not mentioned, I've learned to suspect that is where the story lies. No one is mentioning Saudi Arabia at the moment. Now, Saudi Arabia has two strands which are getting it into a kind of a pincer. One is, of course, they've been talking about the Shia axis. The other is the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood and the Shia. The third one was the Baathists. The capacity of the ISIS to hold a territory does not give me the impression that it is a fly-by-night terrorist operation. They are seasoned. This is the Baath party coming back, the central nervous system of the Baath party getting entangled with, amalgamated with the Muslim Brotherhood, both of which are anathema to the Saudis. And this is what is bringing the Americans down on the side of the Saudis. Why I mention this? Because Ambassador Prabhat Shukla just now mentioned Pakistan. There was a report that Pakistani troops are being required to protect the Saudi border from the ISIS lurching. Somewhere there is the story evolving. Does it make sense to you, gentlemen?
Oh yes, definitely. See, Americans are talking against the ISIS. But who is financing ISIS right now? Of course, some time back it was being financed by Americans.
Yes.
And the arms weapons were coming from American sources. But right now they are being financed by Saudis. Saudis are the closest
Saudis
ally.
financed them for one reason. Like the Saudis and the Americans, they created Osama bin Laden, and Osama bin Laden went out of control. We have seen these extremist groups are created for one purpose, but they completely turn around and bite the hand that feeds. And this appears to have happened. Well, we have run out of time. From Wales to Ukraine to the ISIS and West Asia, it has been, as I said, a wide campus, and we will try next time round. In fact, we have given Professor Mohanty the task to find out exactly what is going on in the Ukraine. And on that note, thank you and goodbye.
Tata.